So I come from Myanmar, and we're going through some very dark and difficult times right now. Myanmar is one of the poorest countries in the world. It's also been one of the most isolated. Up until a few years ago, we were second to North Korea in terms of connectivity and isolation. So we run a creative design company in Myanmar. 13 years ago, my husband and 2 children moved back. And we set up Proximity Designs to help rural families become more prosperous. We create products like soil testing services and irrigation pumps. We focus on family farms because they're the backbone of the economy. They contribute to about 40% of the GDP and employ 2/3 of the labor force. Not only that, they produce most of the food the country eats. Yet the tragedy is that they've been neglected and left behind for decades. They lack basic technologies, know-how, and capital to be more productive. This is true of a lot of small farms across developing countries in the world. There's an estimated 450 million households like this. Meanwhile, in global agriculture, things are getting more capital intensive and precise. We've entered the next technological era called precision agriculture. Large farms across the US and Europe and Australia are using data from sensors to become more profitable, sustainable, and efficient. And back in places like Myanmar, we're still using the rope and bucket and planting by hand. And this is an analog moisture sensor. If you want to know whether you need to irrigate, you take a clump of mud, and if it disintegrates, then it's time to water your crops. So I want to talk about the 3 ways we work to help rural families become more prosperous. The first is that we use human-centered design, or user-centered design. And by that, I mean we center our design and innovation around the human beings who will use our products. So it sounds simple enough, but it's a rigorous process that requires a lot of in-depth field research, rapid prototyping, and constant iteration. It takes deep knowledge and empathy to solve a complex problem like poverty, and it's hard to do from far away. So we get very close to our customers, and we engage with them throughout the year with our products and services. We have thousands of conversations with them, and we try to discover not only what they're doing and how they're doing it, but why they're doing it. It's really important to understand their needs and aspirations. So when we first started, we had a $40 metal pump that we thought was pretty affordable. It was 1/10 of the price that was for pumps in the marketplace. But farmers kept giving us brutally honest feedback and said, "Can you make it lighter? Can you make it cheaper?" So we kept prototyping with farmers and getting their input, and we came up with the baby elephant pump. It's, I think it's the only one like it in the world. It's very lightweight and simple to use. Women and children like to use it, and it costs only $18. We've sold over 50,000 of these. So the second way we work is that we treat people as customers, and they're not charity recipients or aid beneficiaries. It's a relationship of mutual exchange and power. And you see, if you give something away free, you never know whether it's used or valued. And here the customer decides and whether something we're providing is valuable to them or not. Where if they don't like the price or our product, they simply don't buy it. And we're held directly accountable, and we get immediate feedback. So over the last 13 years, we've helped 2.7 million people, or 555,000 households, through our products and services. And they typically are able to earn extra incomes of $250 a year. And the top 3 uses of their extra income have been more food for the family, better diets, and secondly, reinvesting in their farms, and third, to keep their kids in school. But we don't only design for impact, we design to transform lives and delight our customers. So I met a farmer in the Delta, in the Irrawaddy Delta, in a village, and he was saying that he used to be too poor to farm. He couldn't afford the equipment. And so what he did was climb tall palm trees, and he would tap the toddy palm juice. And these palm juice tappers are typically the bottom rung of the social ladder in villages. And he was saying that he was never invited to village ceremonies or celebrations because he was considered too poor to contribute. And one day he fell out of a tree and broke his back. So he was desperate to figure out how to feed his family. And he came across our foot pump, and it was perfect with his bad back. He only needed a treadle. And so he was able to buy the pump and started cultivating a small plot of vegetables around his house. And he said he made the most money he ever did in his life. And he said, you know, I used to be a nobody, but now I'm somebody. But the line that really got me was when he said, I am so happy I could do cartwheels in front of the entire village. So for the next 3 to 5 years, we have ambitious plans to help another 5 million people, or 1 million family farms. And while we have customers in over 10,000 villages across Myanmar, and we're working at the micro level to remove barriers to creativity and entrepreneurship, we also work at the macro level. We use our intimate knowledge and research of the country, and we engage leaders on pressing issues facing the country. So it's been really important for us to work at the micro and the macro level to affect change. I want to tell you what keeps us going during these dark and difficult times. This is Umau Maun, and he's 80 years old, and this is his oldest son. He was telling me that for most of his adult life, he was a landless laborer. And since he was 15 years old, he hauled water for other people's fields. And but a few years ago, he took a bet on our products, and he rented a small plot of land, and he began growing his own crops. And he did well. He started using our drip irrigation and our other products. And today, he owns 8 acres and employs 30 farm workers. And this is his latest purchase from us. It's a solar-powered irrigation pump. And as he was talking, he was saying that for most of his life, when he was hauling water, he said he would sweat so much that he could wring out the sweat from his wet sarong in the hot sun. And he said nowadays, his sole job is to sit under the shade tree and drink tea, and every now and then he gets up and adjusts the solar panels. And as we were talking, he got a phone call from his youngest son in the capital, and he takes out his brand new smartphone, and I could hear him bragging about his modern, new, quiet solar pump. And as he got off, he started asking me, you know, what other technologies are there for farmers like him from around the world? And he said, you know, I know we've entered a new era, and I know I have a lot of catching up to do. And with all his youthful enthusiasm, he says, but I say, bring it on. So it's farmers like Umau Maun who inspire us to keep going in this difficult task of building a nation that can someday be democratic, fair, prosperous, and inclusive for all. Thank you.
So I love when there are these moments where concepts we talk about become real. And for me, this is the perfect example of we talk about designing not just for needs, but for aspirations. Case in point. So thank you for your work. First question for you. We talk a lot about human-centered design in the global development sector. It's really become a buzzword. And yet, we're not seeing that approach taken as widely as it needs to be taken to achieve the kind of change we want to see with the SDGs. So any advice for this audience or those watching online about steps they can take individually or as organizations to incorporate some of the same approaches?
Yeah, I think it'd be great to ask ourselves two questions. I don't think we're doing design just for innovation's sake. I think it's important to be clear that we're designing for impact. So the number one question is, what is the impact of your particular program, your intervention, your product, your service on that household, and measure it. And secondly, what is the most cost-effective way to deliver that impact? And measure that and be able to compare across many interventions or products or services and be really rigorous about it. And I guess at a personal level, I think we can all grow in empathy, and I think we can all be willing to listen and engage people on their own terms, and be willing to be held accountable and be proximate.
Any advice when you say be proximate? Obviously, you've followed that in your own life. You moved to Myanmar to work on these issues, to be close to these issues, and throughout your career, formerly you actually worked in the aid sector, for the World Bank, the UN, and other agencies. That's a sector where you sometimes are trying to solve problems far away. And I wonder, any advice for people on how to get proximate?
Well, I think we need to be willing to just spend a lot of time with the end user and the human beings that are at the end of our programs, and just be open and flexible, and not be afraid to make huge changes.
Thank you. Great call to action. Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you.